Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Collision Live. Daniel here, and joined at the desk, as I always am, by the Buzz Lightyear to my Woody, Mr. Samuel David Kemp. What is up?
Oh, not too much, Daniel. We're all just trying to figure out what is that Lightyear movie and how does it fit into Toy Story?
Yeah, I should have said the Tim Allen beloved voiced Buzz Lightyear to my critically panned Chris Evans version, but I didn't want to stir up the controversy too soon in this show.
We'll get there, Daniel.
We'll get there. We'll be talking about that. But what's up? This is... finally have our whole crew back. We've been at different times of the day and pre-recording. It's been crazy. Summer's crazy. We have our whole Collision crew here, but a lot of stuff going on this week. Anything?
Yeah, feeling good and looking forward to the epic conclusion to the Obi-Wan series. Like that's kind of been top of mind for me lately.
Yeah, tomorrow morning that thing's dropped. Excited to look to dig into that. We'll say shout out to user Cinnamon Lover who's commented on several of our videos for pointing out that we've had a typo in our videos for the last couple months. I don't know if that's just like one of those things where you have like food in your teeth that, hey, all you other viewers, no one's pointed that out to us. You just let us embarrass ourselves for months. Hey, we got that fixed. So thank you for doing that. But there's a lot of stuff going on this week to dig into, to talk about. Kind of some more topical stuff and then just some a general topic. A lot of pop culture news. If you've never joined us before, welcome to the Collision Live. It's our live stream / audio only podcast, if that's how you listen to us, where we just sort of look at what's going on in pop culture and come at it from like a biblical Christian perspective and just dialogue it, kind of wrestle with it, and just, hey, how should Christians respond? How should we engage with this stuff? So definitely lots going on. But to kick off our show, like we always do, we have our first segment, Pop Culture News. So let's run through these pretty quick. We got several kind of newsy stories. One of them, which is probably no surprise, they're maybe getting down to like the B or C tier of the classic Disney movies with their live action remakes. They're remaking Hercules, and they just announced this week. Guy Ritchie, who also directed the Aladdin, which most people hated, and I actually kind of liked, will be directing this. And the Russo brothers, who've done Avengers Endgame, a lot of the MCU stuff, will be producing. So definitely looking forward to that. Speaking of sort of swords and sandals stories, Game of Thrones, the popular but also controversial show, just announced they're doing a spinoff. Kit Harington is kind of the mopey Jon Snow, featuring him. So I guess we're sort of expanding that universe and the sort of I guess the new golden age of fantasy there's fantasy shows everywhere lately, which as a fantasy person I'm excited about. Other news, speaking of fantasy and sci-fi, Taika Waititi, who is about to release his Thor movie, kind of a quirky director. He's been talking about his new Star Wars movie, which I guess will be the next theatrical Star Wars story to come. It's sort of unsure when this thing's coming out, but he's just sort of sharing some of his vision that it's going to be whole new characters, expand the universe, all that stuff. Again, more Star Wars is never a bad thing, so excited for that. Speaking of things that are a bad thing, Ezra Miller, the ongoing drama, this actor from... And he's been in the Fantastic Beasts. He's the Flash and the DC universe. Again, this life kind of going out of control. A lot of stuff to get into that. I think it's tragic. This some of the demons he's wrestling with. But apparently, kind of dumped by Warner Brothers, who's just had a bad string of hiring actors that get into controversy with I guess both parties, even in the Johnny Depp trial. Another thing, I don't know if this is necessarily one that is on my radar for what I'm excited for, but I think other people will be. Knives Out, kind of by director Rian Johnson, just announced the sequel to that. They released a trailer for this thing called The Glass Onion, which I can't decide if that's a really cool title or just one of the dumbest titles I've ever heard. So let me know. I'm still on the fence about that. And the last... story for us, the upcoming Barbie movie, which we've been talking about and trying to figure out what in the world this thing is. They released the first image of Ryan Gosling as Ken, and I guess the first thought I had in this picture is, I wonder if Sam Camp is getting royalties for them using his body to Photoshop Ryan Gosling's face onto it, so he'll have to let us know. But hey, if you're excited for the Barbie movie like Sam is, then hey, here's a little more to tease you for that. But that's all we got this week in pop culture news.
That's awesome. I think they nailed the Ken image with Ryan Gosling. That's pretty funny. And no, I'm not getting royalties, and I'm
You just did this out of the goodness of your heart, your creative inspiration.
You know, I feel like it'll lead to other work, and so I'm okay with it to be, you know, sort of pro bono this first go round.
If God blessed you with that body, then I guess you just feel like using that to bless other people. Hey, let us know. Pop culture news again. We'll get into some more like meaty subjects and things to talk about and controversies and all that. But hey, we do love pop culture here. I think as Christians, kind of keeping up to date with what's going on and the stories, the movies, kind of the future conversations that will come out of those. Yeah. So we always like to kind of celebrate some of that. But to dive right into it, right into the deep end of the pool, probably the biggest kind of thing happening in pop culture right now is Pixar's Lightyear, the new Pixar animation movie, kind of weirdly adjacently connected to the Toy Story franchise, but it's kind of the real life version of the Buzz toy. It's kind of confusing. It makes more sense when you see the movie, but I know a lot of people weren't really sure about this movie. But again, we reviewed that on the channel. I encourage you to check that out. But probably the big conversation, at least from like in kind of our Christian circles, about this movie is really centered around kind of the LGBTQ subplot, some of that stuff, and kind of what do you do with that? I know the internet has been a buzz with opinions on that. So before we kind of get into what do we do with this? How do we process this? What does it mean? Just to sort of to paint the picture, to see kind of what's going on if you're not familiar with all this story. So the movie does feature kind of the first upfront kind of same-sex relationship in a Pixar movie. Again, they've sort of dipped their toes in the past with some of that, and hey, this time they are full-blown showing the relationship, and it's more of a central part to the plot, including like a same-sex kiss with this couple. So that's in there, kind of leading up to the movie. This was already kind of a conversation. There's a quote that actually stood out to me, which we can throw up on our. This is Chris Evans, who voices the Buzz character, and this is sort of him talking about the fact that this is going to be controversial, and that kind of responding to some of the critics of this. And this is what he said. He said, "The real truth is those people are idiots. Every time there's been a social advancement as we wake up, the goal is to pay them no mind, march forward, and embrace the growth that makes us human." And, we'll return to that quote in a minute, because in some ways it's almost like an AI algorithm, like kind of pumping out sort of that progressive and some of the things that I think Christians are concerned about. His quote kind of captures all of them. Again, this isn't just a conversation that I think is just for Christians. If we want to throw up, like I just saw IGN. In their review of this movie, right in their one of the first things they say is features striking visuals, strong performances, and a love out loud lesbian relationship that we're thrilled to see on screen. So definitely, it's not just that Christians are making this sort of the conversation. That the media is obviously pumping this thing up, focusing very strongly on that aspect of it, and kind of pushing that forward. And kind of the last thing, and then we can kind of get into this dialoguing about this. It's sort of the most recent chapter in this story is that the movie is disappointing at the box office. This movie, there's been a lot of spins of people trying to paint this as a big success. It is definitely not. This movie, it's not necessarily a bomb, I don't think, just because the sights are already set so high, and it still is making money and probably will make back its money, but definitely way, way below what these sort of movies typically make, especially a movie connected so strongly to like a popular, successful franchise like the Toy Story movies. $51 million opening. I think anything below like 80 million would be considered a failure, and I'm sure they were hoping for over 100 million with this thing. So again, and people are trying to, what does that mean? Why did this movie fail? So lots of stuff to talk about with this. So I thought we could just have a conversation, because I think there is a lot of conversations going on about this movie. Again, not necessarily that we're coming at it have one kind of thing to nail down, but you sort of see, again, to be clear, I've seen this movie, I reviewed it. Sam has not seen this movie yet.
Yeah.
So I don't think necessarily you have to have seen it, because the conversations are more general. But as sort of someone that hasn't seen it, just been kind of watching the craziness go on, like, what are some of your initial takeaways with this whole drama?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things come to mind, but one, I would say this maybe sort of highlights the perils of trying to revive like old franchises, and or trying to adjacently attach to old franchises, because I feel like the emotional sort of response to something that sort of tries to come on to, like, a recently retired franchise, or resurrect some nostalgia from something else, it can be very bad. I think the flip side of that is it can be really great, and I think the new Top Gun movie is an example of like nailing, what the sort of the love and affection they had for the original to the sequel. And so I think there is, I just think anytime someone tries to, do something that has like a backstory or has a history with like a fan base, like that's always going to be trickier to navigate, I think. And I think that's part of the conversation is people have such like deep emotional ties to the original films and the original voice actors, as it turns out, or maybe they're pretending to have strong ties to the original voice actors. And I think the other thing would just be that the conversation about the sort of the lesbian love scene and the subsequent performance or lack of performance of the movie, we kind of talked about this some before we started recording, was that it can confirm your priors. Like, so if if you're all for the LGBTQ plus agenda, then this is an example of the bigoted America that we inhabit. If you're against that idea, then this is proof that you shouldn't be doing this in movies because look how bad it's doing. And so I think, a starting place, those are sort of more broadly speaking.
Because that is some of the conversations, like, why did this movie do so bad? And like Sam said, like, I think there is a tendency, not just in like this situation, but it's like in general, to like whatever happens in pop culture, like inevitably sort of affirms what you already thought about, sort of like the whole, like, go woke, go broke, but like, then there's a movie that features the stuff that's very successful and no one says anything. And like personally, again, I don't know, this thing is still in theaters, it just came out a couple of days ago. I have no doubt that like it definitely played a factor, and at least maybe I'm in my own Christian bubble, but it just seems like the response for a lot of people is not going to go see this movie with their kids. Like, I saw this to review. I don't think I'm going to see this with my kids in the theater. There's several tickets that won't be going towards this movie. So I do think that is a factor. I do think, like you said, like it was also even before we knew that this was going to be a subplot. Like people were sort of like, why? Like, why are we making this? Like, why is this isn't really Toy Story? Like, I don't understand. Like, so is this connected?
You start from a place of confusion in the marketing department of like, so how is this Toy Story? Like, what is so if you start there, then like the road ahead is going to be a bit rocky, I think. And so I think, again, and then you just heap on some controversy and culture wars or whatever, and then you got a really hard time to sell a movie like this.
Yes, so I think it's probably the real answer. The reasons are probably way more complicated and nuanced than just, hey, this is what I thought and this affirms what I thought. But it's become, and kind of like that the Chris Evans quote, like like this isn't just a conversation that was had because Christians, like a bunch of these bigoted Christians, like want to make it a conversation. Like the lead up, almost every interview, and like maybe that's just to blame like the marketing and like the trade magazines and stuff. Like all the questions were about like this moment and like putting the same sex kiss again. So we've shared before, like they cut out some of the subplot apparently, and then after some of like the controversies with the Florida the bill and some of that stuff, like they kind of the pressure and backlash, so they put kind of inserted it back into the movie.
And like you said, and we have you did a review of this as well, which you can see on our channel. But I think one of the things too is that it as much as they say that it's sort of a natural part of the story, like I think you mentioned that it didn't feel very integral to the story, and obviously it wasn't because it used to not be there and then it was there again. So
yeah, because that is the again, that's kind of what I wanted us to, for the rest of this topic, kind of get into, like what does it mean, like is this an agenda, is this thing different, how should Christians respond, like at least from like the interviews and stuff, like they presented it very much as like, hey, this is just a reflection of the world we live, it's natural, we're not trying to push anything, we're just trying to be authentic to our culture, at least to me, and maybe that's this thing about me, but did not play that way. Like it played very much like, stop the movie, have this conversation, and almost like, I would almost say, you could almost hear like the voice of the filmmaker more than like the characters. Like it didn't
Yeah.
seem some of the later stuff I could see how they could spin it as sort of this they're just sort of showing that the characters are gay and they're not necessarily making a big deal about it. The intro to it definitely doesn't do that. And I guess the question for you, Sam, to help me figure out what I think. Again, I'm somewhat still working through this a bit. Like as far as like what does it mean? What is the best way to respond to this? And like because I think that the knee jerk kind of emotional thing is just like it's the gay agenda, it's the LGBTQ agenda, and clearly when you see like some of these like if you don't agree you're just an idiot, you can die off like a dinosaur. Like there's or the reviews and stuff like the best part about this movie is that we had a gay relationship, and so I definitely think like there is undeniably an aspect of like we are trying to do this is in here to accomplish a social change or like to make this normal or like reflect like so there is that aspect of it, but I do think that I don't know, maybe at least to me like some of the like it's just like I've seen some people say why would they even think that it was appropriate to put this in like a kids movie, and like as a Christian like I don't necessarily want that in a kids movie. But I guess where I've been at is like trying to understand like from like the world's perspective, like I don't know, almost like we're shocked that like a secular culture is telling stories that reflect the mindsets and lifestyles of a secular culture. And you're kind of so caught up in that rather than just sort of navigating what is there. Like what?
Yeah, no, I think you're right in looking at it like that. I mean, we've said it on here I think a number of times is that like why do we act so shocked when like the world has the world's point of view? It's like people in the church are shocked and appalled that something like this would be in a film made for kids. It's like, well, the world that the world inhabits, like that's kind of a normal life, and I think it's even more amplified by like those sort of in the machine of Hollywood. I would say probably a large percentage of those people either have or know gay people in their lives, gay families, very maybe alternate identities or points of view that may not be the mainstream in sort of let's say middle America, but that are very much like just a normal part of life in their culture and where they're coming from. And so I think seeing it in a film in a lot of ways is a very natural sort of progression of things. And I think maybe what people are pushing back on more so now is that it's in a kids film. And I feel like, and we've talked about this some before, is just when it comes to like children's entertainment, I think there are some different sort of precautions that parents can take versus just normalizing something like this and just maybe a more grown-up film. And so I think that's where some of the pushback is coming from when it comes to kids. But again, that I don't think that people need to be so shocked and surprised when it comes to like, well, of course, like it was just a matter of time before something like this ended up in kids films. And this isn't the first kids film to have, this kind of stuff in it. And I think
maybe just like the most prominent. Like, there's been like or allusions to it, and I guess maybe that's sort of where I'm coming at is like the because I've had even like in my review for Lightyear, people like I think you're taking this too lightly. You need to be more mad about this, and like I think maybe I can be disappointed. I want to navigate it, but like, at least to me, like this is in a culture where like a gay marriage is legal and like it happens. I've known people that were raised by two moms. Like I'm not surprised. I think like some people seem to be, and like I think it's natural. Like, I guess for me, I think the more valuable I guess conversations is rather than just like I can't believe that this thing that Hollywood and the wider culture thinks is normal and not an issue, like that they don't think that's like kind of what we can't control is like, what do you do as like Christians? Like, do we, how do we respond to this? I think movies reflect culture. They shape culture. They help us understand culture. Like as a parent, like, I think I'm going to need to raise my kids I can't isolate them from that. Like it's going to be in more and more movies. It's going to be, my wife's a middle school, or she was a middle school teacher, and like the kids in a private Christian school, and like the kids are having these conversations and about sexuality. Like it's something that I think Christians need to approach and think through. And I think maybe just getting so caught up in like, it's just an agenda and it's all this evil and evil Hollywood. And like, I guess rather than just like, so what do we do about this? Like, how do we understand this?
Yeah.
Like, how do we process it? How is it shaping culture? But again, let us know. We might touch on this again or from a different angle of this movie and stuff.
I imagine this probably won't be the last.
Because I do think there's a lot of conversations to have about this movie and just sort of how do we approach these issues and what makes it sort of an agenda, or what's the difference between an agenda or just reflecting a secular kind of culture that doesn't believe the same things. I think there's nuance in there that sometimes we miss as Christians. But let us know. Are you taking your kids to see this movie? Are you going to watch it at home and maybe skip some of these scenes? Are you just going to to avoid and boycott it, kind of vote with your wallet? I think there's lots of different ways Christians can, or just watch it with your kids, talk to them about it. I think there's lots of valid ways that Christians can respond to this, and not just like one right Christian, the way Jesus would do it. I think there's lots of ways. So let us know. We'd love to have a conversation with that with you. But another conversation that I'm excited to have is our next segment of our show. We have Host Corner. So this is my week to share my thoughts, go on my rant, stand on my soapbox, and I will. I'm going to stand on the soapbox a little bit. One of the things that just sort of annoys me about some of that's kind of plugged into, or even some of that reviews movies and talks about movies, is the whole kind of misunderstanding, overuse of the word plot holes. That's sort of being like the go-to. Everyone's worried about plot holes and talking about movies and things that are plot holes. And you see those 10 plot holes in this recent episode, and then you read the list, and 7 of them aren't plot holes. And here's sort of the definition of a plot hole is a gap or inconsistency in a storyline that goes against the flow of logic established by the story's plot, or a blatant omission of relevant information. I guess the distinction that I would have is that a plot hole is not just something that's not explained in a movie. A plot hole is something that can't be explained. Filmmakers aren't required to explain anything. But real quick, I really want to show you kind of a scene that I do think summarizes this whole discussion. Probably the most classic plot hole in a movie. You have, if you're watching at least the video version, you see the famous T-Rex breakout scene in Jurassic Park. Breaking out, if you show the next picture, this is sort of the follow-up scene where suddenly that pit that the T-Rex walked out of is a gaping hole that just came out of nowhere, makes no sense. The scene's so exciting that no one ever notices that, no one cares because you're just following the story. No one's caught up in wait a minute, where did that big hole come from? And I will show that if you want to do a deeper dive in it, again, so this usually gets used as the famous plot hole in movies. There are maps and things even in the original script that does kind of make sense of it. That it's really more just that we don't see the way that the thing was set up, that it actually does make sense. And I think people get so caught up in these sort of things that it doesn't make logical sense. That I did get a kick out of when Steven Spielberg was asked about this specific scene. I said, what about this apparent plot hole? His response was, so what? He didn't care. I think he just telling a good story. No one notices, and I do think that is one of my. And I know I'm way out of time, so I can wrap this thing up. But I do think one of my annoyances. I think that there's been a tendency in the way that we respond to movies and stuff of trying to outsmart the filmmakers and try and point out all the flaws. Where I think at the end of the day, movies are here to entertain us, to deal with bigger themes, not just to it's not like some realistic science class or something. So I do think, hey, if your response is always just try and find a plot hole in everything you're watching, then you're probably missing the point. But what am I just grumpy? I know I get grumpy about this stuff, but plot holes,
yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think, I don't know if it's whatever the saying is, but those who can't do criticize those who do or whatever. But okay, I think you just have a lot of people that are just sort of sour people, and they just take pleasure in sort of pointing out inconsistencies or seeming inconsistencies in a movie, or those who are always going to say the book is better, which maybe most of the time it is, but still it's the movie doesn't have the luxury of thousands of pages to sort of meticulously walk you through why something is the way it is. And so I don't know, I think if that's your hill to die on, then maybe movies aren't for you.
Because there are actual plot holes where characters do things that contradict what's being established, and I think that does break some of the immersion and stuff. So I think filmmakers and stuff we they should avoid plot holes. Storytellers shouldn't have a bunch of plot holes. But I do think in Spielberg, he does that in a bunch of movies where he just sort of throws out these like, you know what, I know this doesn't make sense necessarily, but like it makes sense to the story I'm telling, and people just sort of go along with it.
Yeah.
But I do think,
And you do. I mean, you're okay. Jurassic Park. You're suspending disbelief already. You know, it's sort of like pointing out plot holes in Star Wars. It's like it's just like a space cowboy movie. So, you know, maybe give a little bit of
it's like people that say that there wouldn't be noise in space and the Star Wars ships blow up.
those wouldn't have exploded because there's not oxygen.
Yeah.
What are these people doing?
If a real life Jedi did that, there wouldn't be noise in space. It's silent. So I didn't think, hey, you know, just enjoy movies. Movies are made to be enjoyed. Don't get so caught up in trying to like dissect all the plot holes and like as though we are so much smarter than the filmmakers. But speaking of making movies, telling stories, how to do it, how not to do it. Kind of the second topic I wanted us to get into in this episode of our show is kind of inspired by. So I did a review for Jerry and Marge Go Large, a movie that was released on the Paramount Plus platform, kind of dealing with the true story of this kind of older retired couple, and they kind of game the lottery and try and bless their town, and a lot of good themes. Kind of surprised that this movie there's been as much interest in it as there was. I wasn't sure if this is kind of too off the beaten path for that. But one of the things that I appreciated about that movie is that it dealt with like a depiction of an older, healthy marriage. Like a couple that starts the movie already together and like ends the movie still together, and like there's not a whole lot of drama in between, and they just trust each other, and like just sort of that positive, like, you know, it's not a Christian or faith-based film, but it is sort of affirming just a depiction of like a healthy, kind of almost like normalizing like the maybe the opposite of like the Lightyear stuff of like, hey, here's just sort of what a healthy marriage and relationship looks like. And I don't know, so it kind of got me. And I was talking with some other people about this, even in some of the comments and stuff. Is sort of the difference between, I guess, like movies like this that just sort of showcase like kind of Christian values, as opposed to like what I think tends to happen of like sort of the preaching, like the showing versus telling, where, you know, there's faith-based films about marriage, but like they're films like about marriage. Like this is a film that's made to teach this, and like everything's designed rather than just sort of like, hey, here's this sort of hide it in this one thing. We don't need to make it all religious. Like, I don't know. What do you like?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've talked about this before, but, you know, I am a really big fan of the more showing aspect rather than just the telling, because I think showing is way more natural and it's much more subtle, and I think it can be way more powerful as well, because you just, like, this is, you know, two characters in a film, and, you know, this is a very natural way for them to interact, and it's a healthy marriage, and I think that's way better than sort of this clunky sort of, this is what a good marriage should look like, and, you know, let's spell it out for you. And so, and I think too, like, I feel like the greatest power in film is the visuals, and so I like to see when movies actually use that strength of like the whole, you know, the whole point of movies is that it's a visual storytelling medium, and, you know, if it's so like dialogue dependent or sort of, you know, narrator dependent or something that has to spell things out for you, I don't like that as much. And so when you can just see examples of virtues, I think that the church and Christians can certainly celebrate. I think that's a much bigger win, I think, for what the church is trying to do in culture, or what Christians should be trying to do in culture, than a movie that's like super niche and very much like preachy to most likely the choir anyways. And so I think if you're wanting to kind of break out of like the church audience with movies, then, you know, perhaps think about movies that aren't Christian but promote those sort of Christian values, if you will, or virtues that can be sort of encouraged by the church.
Yeah, because I think we, again, like as the church, I think what we're kind of our bread and butter is like sermons and like church services,
right,
and like preaching, and I think we've sort of, not obviously not all the time, but like we've taken a lot of that mentality and like transported that like into like the way we tell movies, which a lot of times, like I think that's why like faith-based films can often be like the butt of jokes, like that it's like, here's like a you know, a sermon in a very thin disguise of like a movie, but it's very clearly designed as a way of like, here's a message we want to teach and preach, and like we're gonna kind of just attach it to some characters who will do things that support that thing. And it's very, and again, that's why you get a lot of like, the movie, then it comes out with like the Bible study that where you can like walk through it all after, and like it's really clearly like connected to like this is like a message. We have a message.
And it's very obviously a tool, and I think that's the other thing too. It's like if you're just packaging your sermon in the guise of a movie, it very much feels that way, and it feels like this is simply like a Bible study tool that you're trying to use, and that's okay. Like if that's what you want it to be, so be it. But that's not going to be like a movie, and that's not going to be a film in the same sense that like all the other ones are. And so I think when you just sort of try and repackage your messaging into a certain medium, like I think people can feel that, and I think people notice that, and I think that's really the difference between a movie like Jerry and Marge Go Large, that it's not Christian, but it certainly has things in it that I think people in the church would like to see normalized, which is like healthy, long-lasting marriages, versus something like faith-based film. That's
because even like the again, this sort of almost piggybacks on like the Lightyear thing. Is like, I think I'm actually working on an article that kind of gets into some of this, but like we even like with like so-called like secular films, like we kind of get outraged or focus a lot on something like the message, like preaching the message, but I think like the reality is like usually the actual like message isn't really making much, like it's so easily to like see, and so out front, like it's almost it's like someone yelling like there is no God right in your face. Like that's not really a challenge unless you just have a really shallow faith. Like I think part of the reason why people are concerned about something like Lightyear is that at least in theory, like it's less of like preaching a message and more just like sort of showcasing this sort of lifestyle in such a way that it sort of normalizes and like it glorifies it, and it kind of presents it as something. And like then as you get more and more of these films, like it just sort of becomes like, oh, that's just the way that things are. And like, but it's almost like we haven't, like that's what we're the most like fearful of in like non-faith-based Christian films. But like we haven't always taken that same mentality to like creating our films, that like, hey, we want to preach a message, like we want to sort of cover the whole field of all the different messages we want to sneak in there, rather than just like, hey, here's this a movie. It's not necessarily even like a super religious movie, but like it's just the things that we value as Christians that are important. Like you see that in these characters, and like it's telling stories that bring those out. I feel like that in some ways is way more of an effective, and like it's less of like the same way Christians get very turned off from like this is an agenda film, we're not going to go see that. Like, I think the non-believers in the world aren't necessarily drawn to like, hey, here's the Christian that want to go hear a sermon in this movie. Like, but I think they will if it's a good movie that's just sort of presenting these characters and stuff. Like, I think they will be drawn to that.
Yeah, and again, I think the power of showing is far greater than that of just sort of telling. And I think people don't like to be told stuff anyways. But I think I just think it's a lot more powerful to show the sort of behaviors and lifestyles that you want to see promoted, rather than just sort of telling or saying that.
Yeah, and obviously I bring everything back to Lord of the Rings, so this is like what I do. But I think like, and I won't read the actual whole quote, but I think that's why that story has been so like easily like so popular and spread, is like it's not he's not preaching anything. He would like turn over in his grave if he thought he was like preaching something, but like kind of the Christian values and like ethics and virtues and stuff like are so deeply embedded in those characters, and like it's like mercy and forgiveness and like all those faith and belief in the sovereignty of a divine pact. All those things are like so central to the story, but it's just through characters that like embody them, rather than like, here's a movie about forgiveness and why you need to, and we're going to show you. Like it's less of like a preachy kind of thing. So I don't know. I think there's definitely potential for Christians to do that. Not every story has to just be a gospel presentation. I think we can just focus on marriage, or we can focus on just different aspects of, or just doubt or depression. So many different areas that we can just sort of look at and kind of approach it as a Christian without necessarily pulling it into like a Sunday school lesson. But let us know, are there any Christian movies or just movies that maybe that aren't even made by believers that do that kind of have inspired you with the characters and the way that they embody some of these things in a way that didn't make you feel like you were like Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, sitting in your pew for Sunday school. We'd love to hear some of those movies. But the last segment of our show, we got this week at the Collision. Actually, a lot of stuff going on here at the Collision. Have a new article, encourage you to check out. Just dropped yesterday. Beyond Condemnation: Why Christians Should Engage with Disagreeable Movies. Trying to push back a little bit about the, almost the mindset that if it doesn't line up with biblical values, Christians should have nothing to do with it. That hey, Christians actually don't need to be fearful of some of these things and should engage and deal with the themes that are happening. We don't need to agree with every movie we see, but we should engage with it. And that's encourage you to check out several new reviews. Again, like I said, the Jerry Marge Go Large, have a review on our channel, thecollision.org written, and our YouTube channel, and also Lightyear, obviously probably the bigger one, the controversial one. Get into that, kind of unpack a little bit, and even like kind of describe a bit sort of how the LGBTQ stuff is in there if you're just sort of curious and want to know the best way to understand that. So I encourage you to check those out. Anything else kind of going on this week that...
Well, there's lots of great TV, I think, hitting your streaming devices, and so I think that's kind of exciting. We've got Stranger Things 4 and wrapping up Obi-Wan, and so I think there's a lot of good entertainment to digest and talk about over the summer. So I am for you doing a review of the Obi-Wan series, and I don't think I'll have to twist your arm too hard to do
yeah,
that. So
we'll probably do
if
that.
you would like to see that too, let
again,
Daniel know.
And maybe I'll do Stranger Things. I'm on episode. I've seen the first 4. I'm enjoying the show, so maybe I'll do a review for that. I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for joining us. If you're new or if you've joined us before, I encourage you. Join us next week, every Tuesday at 12. There's always stuff to talk about, always issues and things for Christians to navigate. And if you have any questions or things that you aren't sure about or want us to talk about, send those in. We're always happy to save us a little work and picking out some topics and let you do some of our work for us. But thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.